Nazywam się Jarosław Fetter i sformułowałem filozofię eteryzmu. Przerobimy dzisiaj bardzo ciekawy aspekt, gdzie tak naprawdę pewnego rodzaju filozofia religijna, gnostyczna łączy się z nauką. I puszczę Wam najpierw taki dość ładnie przedstawiony fragment gnostycyzmu, który mówi o tym, że funkcjonujemy w czymś nienamacalnym. Dają do zrozumienia, że jest to ta struktura boska. Tu cały czas brakuje jakby tego określenia, że funkcjonujemy w energetycznej przestrzeni eteru i to ona jest tym fenomenalnym medium, tą nadzwyczajną strukturą, która jest w stanie przenosić w czasie rzeczywistym informacje na drugi koniec siebie. Bo będzie się też tutaj wypowiadał twórca komputera kwantowego. Dokładnie zatoczyliśmy pewne koło, że ta wiedza hipotetyczna, szalona doktryna gnostyków mówiąca o tym, że funkcjonujemy w czymś na kształt energetycznego ojca, tylko oni na tamten język tego jakby nie potrafili jeszcze werbalnie wyrazić.
Materia nie jest podstawą wszystkiego. Istnieje coś głębszego, niewidzialna struktura, która leży u podstaw wszelkiego istnienia. Zrozumienie tego może być kluczem do ucieczki od iluzji. Rzeczywistość wydaje się solidna, ale gdy przyjrzeć się bliżej, wszystko wokół nas jest niczym więcej niż energią zorganizowaną w określony sposób. To, co nazywamy materią, jest w rzeczywistości wzorem wibracyjnym. Doskonały układ niewidzialnych sił, które wspierają strukturę wszechświata. Na przestrzeni dziejów wiele umysłów próbowało zrozumieć tę strukturę. Niektóre z nich doszły do tego samego wniosku. Wszystko można zredukować do liczb. Dla Pitagorasa matematyka była nie tylko narzędziem obliczeniowym, ale podstawowym językiem istnienia. Wierzył, że cała rzeczywistość została zorganizowana zgodnie z matematycznymi wzorcami i że wszechświat podąża za niewidzialnym kodem. Kod ten pojawia się wszędzie, w złotej proporcji, obecnej w naturze i w ludzkim ciele, która powtarza się w galaktykach, burzach, a nawet we wzroście liści drzewa. Porządek, który rządzi wszystkim, nie jest przypadkowy. Podąża za dokładną zasadą, tak jakby wyższy umysł zaprojektował każdy szczegół. W kabale ten wyższy umysł nazywany jest Ein Sof, absolutną nieskończonością. W przeciwieństwie do tradycyjnego Boga, koncepcja ta nie opisuje odizolowanego bytu, ale matematyczną zasadę, która jest zarówno wszystkim, jak i niczym. Nieskończoność i zero współistnieją. Ta sama zasada pojawia się we współczesnej fizyce. Kiedy naukowcy analizują siły podtrzymujące wszechświat, zdają sobie sprawę, że wszystko jest zrównoważone z taką precyzją, że jakiekolwiek najmniejsze zakłócenie uniemożliwiłoby istnienie. Materia i antymateria, energia i jej brak wzajemnie się znoszą, tworząc absolutną równowagę. Jeśli wszystko idealnie się znosi, wynik końcowy jest zawsze taki sam. Zero. Ale nie jest to zwykłe zero. Nie reprezentuje pustki, ale absolutny potencjał. Stan, w którym wszystkie możliwości istnieją w tym samym czasie, czekając na organizację, która je zamanifestuje. To prowadzi nas do nieuniknionego wniosku. Jeśli wszechświat podąża za kodem, nie może to być przypadek. Jeśli istnieje struktura, stoi za nią logika. A jeśli rzeczywistość jest wynikiem doskonałych równań, to Bóg nie jest odizolowaną mistyczną postacią. Bóg jest samym kodem. Stwórca nie jest poza wszechświatem, ale wewnątrz niego.
W tym oto miejscu dochodzimy do czegoś bardzo istotnego, ponieważ oni tutaj już wspominają o immanencji. O czymś, co istnieje w nas, a jednocześnie o czymś, w czym istniejemy my. I najwyraźniej ma to związek właśnie z tym, co istnieje w nas. Wszystko wskazuje na to, że jest to w nas ta nienamacalna, energetyczna cząstka boska, która jest głównym czynnikiem naszej energetycznej tożsamości, nośnikiem.
A nawet więcej, jest wewnątrz każdego z nas. W końcu, jeśli wszystko podlega tej samej matematycznej zasadzie, my również jesteśmy częścią tej struktury. Nie jako coś odrębnego, ale jako indywidualne przejawy tej samej inteligencji. Z tej perspektywy idea Boga jako istoty zewnętrznej staje się bezsensowna. Nie trzeba jej czcić, ponieważ nie jest ani ponad, ani pod niczym. Po prostu jest. A jeśli Bóg nie jest oddzielony od stworzenia, to pytanie przestaje dotyczyć tego, kto stworzył Boga, a staje się tym, co to znaczy być Bogiem. Jeśli rzeczywistość jest ustrukturyzowana przez kod, a Bóg nie jest odrębnym bytem, to ludzka egzystencja nie może być zwykłym przypadkiem. Za wszystkim stoi większy cel. Ale ten cel nie jest tym, którego zawsze nas uczono. Na przestrzeni dziejów wpajano nam, że życie to ciąg prób i testów. Przychodzimy na świat, aby przestrzegać zasad, dogmatów i jeśli zrobimy wszystko dobrze, zostaniemy nagrodzeni po śmierci. Ale ta idea opiera się na założeniu, że jesteśmy gorsi, że musimy zasłużyć na coś większego. Ale co, jeśli prawdziwy cel jest dokładnie odwrotny? Co, jeśli jesteśmy tutaj nie po to, aby cokolwiek udowodnić, ale aby przypomnieć nam, kim naprawdę jesteśmy? Starożytne tradycje duchowe zawsze mówiły o tym dążeniu do przebudzenia. W hinduizmie koncepcja Atmana opisuje boską esencję obecną w każdej istocie. W gnostycyzmie zbawienie nie pochodzi z przestrzegania zewnętrznych praw, ale z poznania własnej natury. W Kabale podróż duszy jest drogą powrotną do zrozumienia jej nieskończonego pochodzenia. Wszystkie te tradycje łączy wspólna idea. Ludzkość zapomniała o swojej prawdziwej tożsamości. Żyjemy tak, jakbyśmy byli tylko fizycznymi ciałami, odizolowanymi jednostkami, podczas gdy w rzeczywistości jesteśmy fragmentami czegoś znacznie większego.
Dochodzimy do ciekawego momentu, gdzie twórca komputera kwantowego mówi o tym, że jego komputer funkcjonuje w czymś rodzaju nadprzestrzennego pola. I nawiązuje do tego, że jakby wszyscy funkcjonujemy w takich polach informacyjnych. I te nasze pola informacyjne jakby współpracują z tą nadprzestrzenią informacyjną. To jakby w prostej linii w ogóle jest nawiązanie do tego gnostycyzmu, chociaż ten gnostycyzm stary też nie do końca wie, o czym mówi, jakby nie nazywa rzeczy po imieniu, eterfów, czyli dusz, i w ogóle eterium i eteru, nie używa tej całej frazeologii. W ogóle tak to wygląda, jakby wręcz unikali skojarzeń z eterem. W eteryzmie jest to podstawą całego istnienia wszystkiego. Matryca, medium jest eter.
It took me 30 years to figure out. I can explain what physicists in 100 years have not understood. Nobody can understand why quantum computers work, because their actual operation cannot occur in space-time. There is a deeper reality where the feelings and the fields exist, the meaning of information exists, and from that world you have this world that is a classical world where you can get classical information, and we think that the only world that exists is this world. But this world we have constructed with our bodies.
What you're about to hear might completely rewire how you see yourself, your body, your mind, even your place in the universe. Federico Faggin isn't just any scientist. He's the man who invented the microprocessor. See, in every computer, each switch, a bit, is either on or off. That's it, 0 or 1. But your body? Every single one of your 50 trillion cells contains the entire blueprint of who you are. Every cell is a miniature reflection of the whole. That's not mechanical, that's holographic.
We, as human beings, we're fields which are part whole of one, the totality of what exists. Same pattern repeated at different scales.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. He says, each of these cells doesn't just hold information, it's connected to the whole body through something deeper, quantum fields. This means your body isn't just a system of parts working in isolation, it's a field of intelligence, a constantly adapting self-aware network. And this isn't speculation, this is backed by the foundations of quantum physics. Now let's unpack that. In classical physics, we treat matter like isolated, measurable stuff. But quantum physics shattered that idea. Particles aren't objects. They're states of a field. You can't separate the wave from the ocean. Likewise, you can't separate a cell from the field it emerges from. So when we ask, what are we really? We're not bags of chemicals reacting predictably. We are dynamic, indeterminate systems woven into fields that respond to intention, attention, and maybe even consciousness. And if that's true, then the way we've modeled consciousness, like it's a side effect of the brain chemistry, isn't just incomplete, it's fundamentally flawed. Stay with me because what comes next dives even deeper. You're about to see why classical science has been missing the most important part of the picture. For over a century, science has operated under a simple rule. If you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. That's how we ended up reducing life to chemical reactions and neurons firing in the brain, because that's what we could observe, record, and replicate. But here's a problem. That method, powerful as it is, can only describe half the picture. The visible half, the measurable half. What it misses are the invisible connections, the quantum fields that hold everything together. And ironically, quantum physics has been telling us this for decades. Particles, which we once believed to be tiny building blocks of matter, turned out to be not particles at all. They're not little marbles bouncing around. They're states of a field. Temporary ripples in something much deeper. They come and go, they aren't permanent, and they aren't separate. This changes everything, especially when it comes to understanding life, because your body, every cell in it, is made of these quantum states, and these states aren't isolated, they're entangled, which means the idea of you being a self-contained machine, it was never true.
Particles are not objects. Particles are states of a field. They cannot be taken away from the fields. They're not separable from the fields.
So why has modern science clung so tightly to the machine model? Because it's predictable, it's controllable, and it gives the illusion of certainty. In a classical world, things follow rules. They can be mapped, built, and manipulated. And that's attractive, not just to scientists, but to industries built around control. But in a quantum classical world, things behave differently. They adapt. They self-organize, they evolve in ways that can't always be predicted. That's a lot harder to monetize, and much harder to dominate. And here's where it gets even deeper. If the classical model strips away meaning, treating consciousness like a byproduct of brain chemistry, then the quantum model does the opposite. It puts consciousness at the foundation, not an accident, not an output, but the starting point of reality itself. And if that's true, then everything from artificial intelligence to neuroscience has been built on a dangerously incomplete understanding of what it means to be alive. If you've ever wondered why consciousness still remains one of the greatest mysteries in science, it comes down to this. We've been trying to explain it using tools that simply aren't built for the job. In the classical world, the world of computers and equations, information is static. You can copy it, move it, and process it through algorithms. That's what your phone does every second of the day. A bit is either 0 or 1, and those values can be duplicated perfectly. But quantum information plays by completely different rules. You can't copy it. You can't even fully observe it without disturbing it. The moment you try to measure a quantum bit, what's called a qubit, you collapse it. The infinite possibilities it holds shrink down to just 1, 0 or 1, based on probability. And once that collapse happens, the original state is lost.
The maximum information that you can get from a quantum bit is a classical bit. The quantum bit cannot be known. The not cloning theorem says that you cannot clone even a quantum bit. Quantum information cannot be reproduced. Classical information can be reproduced.
This means quantum information is private. It cannot be separated from the system that holds it. And here's the mind-bending part. This kind of information behaves more like experience than data. What you feel right now, your inner world, can't be downloaded, cloned, or transferred. It's real. It exists, but only within you. And that leads to a radical idea. Maybe consciousness isn't produced by the brain. Maybe the brain is a translator, a filter for a deeper quantum field that already contains awareness. So when we try to explain consciousness using algorithms, we hit a wall, because algorithms can't produce meaning. They can only simulate structure. A machine might generate a sentence, but it doesn't feel the meaning of that sentence.
Even if AI gives you a good idea, AI doesn't know that it is a good idea. You recognize the good idea of AI with your understanding, with your comprehension.
In this view, consciousness and free will aren't emergent, they're foundational. And everything else, from biology to technology, emerges from them. This flips the scientific model upside down, because if what we feel can't be measured, copied, or simulated, then it may be quantum information tied to a field that science still barely understands. There's a moment in quantum physics that no one can fully explain, a moment where potential becomes actual. It's called the collapse of the wave function, and it's one of the most mysterious transitions in all of science.
The collapse of the wave function is just a way of saying that we don't know.
At the quantum level, particles don't exist in one place. They exist in multiple states at once until we observe them. Then suddenly everything changes. The field collapses and a single outcome appears. But here's the catch. Physics can't explain how that collapse happens. There's no formula, no mechanism. It's not a gradual process. It's instantaneous, unpredictable, and completely outside the bounds of classical cause and effect. And this is where it gets really strange. What if that collapse doesn't happen to us, but through us? What if observation itself, the act of conscious awareness, is what finalizes reality? Think about it. A particle only chooses a state when it's observed. But what does observed mean? A camera, a sensor, or something with the capacity to experience? This idea that consciousness plays a role in shaping reality isn't just philosophical speculation, it's built into the math of quantum mechanics, and it suggests something profound. That you're not just witnessing the world, you're participating in its creation.
Quantum information is the representation of inner experience, and the collapse of the wave function is the representation of the free will.
This isn't about magical thinking, it's about revisiting the assumptions we've made about how matter and mind interact, and realizing that they were never truly separate to begin with. Because if quantum states collapse only when measured, and measurement requires a reference point, then consciousness may be that reference point, not an observer in the background, but an active agent embedded in the field itself. In fact, every act of awareness could be a moment of creation, where infinite possibilities collapse into a single lived experience, one that's only meaningful because you are the one experiencing it. This may be the clearest explanation yet for something science has danced around for decades: why you can't fully describe reality without including the observer. And if that's true, then your attention, your awareness, isn't just a passive process. It might be the very mechanism that turns potential into reality. When you think about information, what comes to mind? A message? A number? A word on a screen? But that kind of information, what physics calls classical, has no meaning on its own. It can be copied, moved, analyzed, but it doesn't feel like anything. In classical systems, meaning is stripped away. A zero is just a zero. A one is just a one. The system doesn't care what it means, it just runs the program. But consciousness doesn't work like that. There's a kind of information we rarely talk about. You don't just know it, you feel it. The warmth of sunlight, the sound of your name, the sense that something is beautiful or true. These are not just inputs, they're experiences, and experiences cannot be reduced to numbers.
What we feel is only within the field. That's how we know. The meaning is within us, is within the field, is not in the information.
This is where the idea of quantum information becomes essential, because quantum information, unlike classical bits, cannot be copied or cloned. It exists as a unique, invisible state, one that collapses the moment it's observed. It's measured. Just like a personal experience, it can be represented but never reproduced. And this leads to a startling realization. Maybe feelings, conscious experiences are themselves quantum phenomena. Maybe your inner world is not something generated by the brain, but something expressed through it. We've built entire civilizations around the idea that meaning comes from the outside world, but what if it's the opposite? What if meaning is generated from the inside and everything else is just the map, not the territory?
A theory of reality is not reality, okay? So what you feel, only you feel, not body, you feel, can actually know, and you know inside. And what you can say about what you feel is a small part of what you feel. Olivo's theorem, 1 bit per quantum bit.
This flips the script on neuroscience, philosophy, even technology. Because if meaning can't be measured or shared in the traditional sense, then no machine, no matter how powerful, can replicate what it's like to be you. This isn't just about consciousness, it's about reality itself. Because when you realize that the universe doesn't contain meaning, but that you're the source of it, then suddenly you're not a passenger in this world, you're a creator. We like to think of the world as something out there, separate from us, something we can study, manipulate, even control. But this idea rests on a deep assumption that the observer and the observed are two different things. Quantum physics says otherwise. At its deepest level, reality is holistic. It's not built from separate parts. It's made of relationships, fields, and interactions. You can't pull something out of context and still understand what it is, because the moment you isolate it, you destroy what made it meaningful in the first place.
There is no clear boundary between classical and quantum. In other words, we again want to put things into boxes. That's the first mistake. There are no separate boxes. One is holistic. The reality, deeper reality, is holistic, means it's not made of separable parts.
This isn't just theory. It shows up everywhere. In a quantum system, you can't fully describe a particle without including the system that observes it. You can't separate the dancer from the dance. The act of observation is part of the process. But in classical science, we've spent centuries trying to reduce everything to pieces, to break nature down into smaller and smaller parts. Why? Because parts can be measured, parts can be controlled. But fields, relationships, those don't fit neatly into equations. So we started simplifying. We took the infinite and made it binary. True or false, right or wrong, 0 or 1. It made things easier to work with, but in doing so, we began mistaking the map for the territory.
Even true or false is an approximation of reality valid under certain conditions.
And that's a problem. The world we've built, the science, the logic, the technology, is based on simplifications that break down the moment we go deep enough. It's like trying to describe a symphony using only 2 notes. At some point, the system becomes incoherent. Not because it's wrong, but because reality is more than logic. It's dynamic, it's alive, and it includes you. The paradox? We've built machines that simulate intelligence, but we still don't understand the very intelligence that built them, because we've been asking the wrong question. Not how does it work, but what is it that knows? And the deeper you go into that question, the more the answers start pointing inward. We've all wondered at some point what happens after death. Let's hear what Federico has to say about it.
Imagine that you control a drone. We are a body, controls a drone. That is in Afghanistan, watching around and semi-autonomous, so I don't have to worry about, I only have to express where I want it to go. So now the drone looks at that reality where it is, sends me information, and I get the conscious experience of what the drone is seeing. That conscious experience is not in my body, is in my consciousness. And based on that, and based on my free will, I'll tell the drone what to do. The drone doesn't know anything. You were so focused on that drone that you only saw what the drone was seeing because you were piloting it and you were concentrated. Then when the drone doesn't send you on its own, you look around and you say, oh my God, there is another world here. You see, that's the same thing, the ego, when the body dies, it doesn't look at the signals of the body anymore. And he looks around and says, oh shit, wow, look at this.
If consciousness doesn't come from the body but only uses the body, then death isn't the end, it's just a disconnection. Like a drone going dark while the operator remains intact, simply shifting awareness back to its original source. And when that drone goes offline, when the body dies, consciousness doesn't disappear, it simply loses its local connection. This isn't just speculation. Thousands of near-death experiences around the world describe the same thing: separation from the body, awareness of surroundings, and a shift into something vaster, more peaceful, more real than anything physical. People report seeing their own surgery from above. They recount conversations that occurred while their brain showed no measurable activity, and in some cases they meet people, relatives, friends they didn't even know had passed until they returned and learn the truth.
They are clinically dead. They're not dead clearly if they are resuscitated, but they are, for all practical purposes, dead. Okay? And they have an experience in the hospital. They see themselves in the operating table. They later tell what's going on. While the brain has no electrical signal, the brain is not functioning. So how can you be outside of the body looking down at your body in the operating table? That cannot be explained, right?
This challenges everything we thought we knew. If the brain stops functioning and yet awareness persists, then consciousness cannot be a product of the brain. It must be something deeper, something already existing before the brain and continuing after it. Even more fascinating is the idea that the physical world we experience is filtered, limited, like a narrow frequency band attuned by the senses. But outside that band, a broader, richer spectrum of reality may be constantly unfolding, one we simply don't perceive through biological eyes. Bachin compares it to vision. You see a tiny slice of light, but the electromagnetic field holds infinitely more. Swap your eyes for a cell phone antenna and suddenly you'd see thousands of conversations happening all around you. So what happens when the filter drops away? When the body is gone and consciousness is no longer tethered to a narrow stream of data? Maybe you don't go anywhere, because maybe you were never really in the body to begin with. There's a moment, instant, silent and complete, when consciousness becomes aware of itself, not just aware of the world around it or of a body moving through space, but of its own existence. That moment isn't gradual, it doesn't build, it flashes, and in that flash, something extraordinary happens, the creation of a self.
The moment that one knows itself, it has to know completely itself, because it's not made of parts. It cannot know a part of itself, it has to know the totality of itself.
This is how individuality begins, not as a separation, but as a reflection. Consciousness looking at itself from one unique angle among infinite possible directions. Each angle creates a new part, whole, a new expression of the same unified feel. Not a copy, not a fragment, but a whole, seen from a different perspective. It's like shining light through a crystal. Every beam is unique, but the source is the same. In this model, life isn't random. It's not a side effect of chemistry, it's the result of awareness folding in on itself, generating complexity through recognition. That's why each conscious being feels like an I, because each one is a distinct viewpoint within the great whole. And here's where it goes even deeper. According to this view, everything that exists comes from this process. The universe doesn't just exist, it knows it exists. And because of that, it creates new layers of experience, new dimensions of expression, not through programming, not through design, but through the sheer act of self-awareness. This isn't metaphor, it's a model that explains why life can't be copied, why consciousness can't be simulated, and why true intelligence is always rooted in experience, not in data. So when we talk about identity, we're not talking about a label or a role or a body, we're talking about the field's way of knowing itself, through you. Once you understand that awareness is not a byproduct of the brain, but the source of everything, those beliefs fall apart.
Consciousness is beyond matter, beyond this space and time. It's the tool for knowing, infinitely more powerful than any instrument that we have ever built.
In this view, intelligence isn't about calculating faster, it's about knowing meaning, feeling truth, recognizing beauty. Things no algorithm can replicate, no matter how advanced. Even if artificial intelligence generates a brilliant idea, it doesn't know that it's brilliant. It doesn't feel it. It can't understand what it means. Only you can do that. This is the line no machine will ever cross. The ability to know what it is like to be. That's why self-awareness matters. It's not just a spiritual luxury, it's a survival mechanism, because when you truly understand who you are, when you experience yourself as part of a larger whole, you stop competing, you start cooperating, not because someone told you to, but because it's the only thing that makes sense. And that might be the most important shift of all, because we live in a world driven by fragmentation, divided by belief, identity, and fear. But those divisions aren't real. They're the result of forgetting what we are. We're not machines. We're not separate. We are fields of consciousness, each one a unique way the universe sees itself. And if enough of us remember that, something changes. Not just in theory, but in how we treat each other, in how we build, in how we live. Because the future doesn't belong to the fastest system. It belongs to the deepest awareness.
Dla mnie jest to absolutnie piękne połączenie i coś jakby naturalnego poprzez oczywiście eteryzm, ponieważ eteryzm od początku łączył jakby właśnie naukę, różnorodność tej otaczającej nas przestrzeni energetycznej, która się składa też z pola informacyjnego. Oni pięknie to tutaj wytłumaczyli. Wszystko to zmierza w stronę zdefiniowania i uzmysłowienia, jakby w czym funkcjonujemy. Wszystko to zmierza w stronę tak naprawdę urzeczywistnienia tej filozofii eteryzmu. To jakby wygląda na to, że ta przestrzeń eteru, jakby ona jest całym spoiwem, nadaje wszystkiemu tej równowagi jest tym jakby polem energii zero, czyli równoważącym. W tym wypadku okazuje się, że energia punktu zero, to całkowite zero, jest nieskończonością. Dochodzimy do takiego momentu, też między innymi dzięki filozofii eteryzmu, że w przyszłości, niedalekiej moim zdaniem, nauka będzie musiała przyznać, że istnieje jeszcze coś poza tym, co widzimy. I tak jak tutaj on pięknie też mówi, no proszę zwrócić uwagę, naukowiec, który jest twórcą komputera kwantowego, stara się potwierdzić, że jest coś poza tym, co widzimy w lustrze, że jest jeszcze jakaś nasza energetyczna wartość, tożsamość, która po odłączeniu ciała przy śmierci klinicznej okazuje się, że jeszcze zbiera dane, że jeszcze coś rejestruje, że jeszcze widzi. Czyli tak naprawdę daje do zrozumienia, a wręcz opowiada dalej o tym, że decyzje są podejmowane nie przez ciało, nie przez małpę, tak jak mówi filozofia eteryzmu, tylko głębiej, przez naszą energetyczną tożsamość. I tutaj dochodzimy do tego, co ja kiedyś mówiłem, co filozofia eteryzmu jakby gwarantowała od początku, że dalej homo sapiens bez przyznania tego, że jest coś więcej poza materialną sferą, nie przejdzie swojej ewolucji. Homo sapiens musi przyznać, gadająca małpa bez futra musi przyznać publicznie, że jest coś więcej. Musi rozwinąć całą mistykę i to wszystko, co jest związane z naszymi przeczuciami. Z tym wszystkim, co płynie z nas od środka, co kazano nam przez tysiące lat tłumić i zastąpiono to jakimiś magicznymi opowieściami. Okazuje się, że ciało jest modemem, który nadaje wyrazu i znaczenia otaczającej nas rzeczywistości. A do tego okazuje się, że wibracja ma znaczenie i to też ona nadaje znaczenia naszej materialnej rzeczywistości. Wychodzi na to, że wszystko to, łącznie z naszymi komórkami, ze wszystkim, zawieramy kod tej całej matrycy. Rozumiecie? Zawieramy to wszystko, co istnieje w naszej materii rzeczywistości, zawiera kod tej materii rzeczywistości. Zawiera tą kod wibracji naszej materii rzeczywistości. Wręcz przebojowy sposób udowodniono, twórca komputera kwantowego, że istnieje coś więcej, jakaś eteryczna przestrzeń, której podlegamy i tak naprawdę jesteśmy odrębnymi polami informacyjnymi, które również zbierają dane, czyli tak zwanymi eterfami, bo to wynika z filozofii eteryzmu.